Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you, Randy and Colleen, for organizing such a wonderful event. This is the last talk of DinoFest that's focusing on the end-Cretaceous mass extinction. So naturally, I'm going to close it out with talking about Crocs through 2 mass extinctions. So here we go. Yeah. In particular, I want to talk about, sorry, I'm a little bit shorter than everybody else. Particularly want to talk about Crocs' success. So periodically, probably once a month, I see on the front page of Reddit like a video, cell phone video of an alligator walking down a golf course in Florida. And like inevitably the top comment is, look at this dinosaur. Look at this relic from the age of dinosaurs. And so Crocs are oftentimes viewed by the public by their old worldness, this incorrectly as this relic of the era of the dinosaurs. And so one of my goals today for this talk is to start helping disprove this idea. Crocs are an especially group of successful animals, and although they're not as speciose as mammals and birds and lizards, they have survived just as long. So I am going to start with this picture of the Cuban crocodile. This is a critically endangered croc that's found only in Cuba and some very tiny islands off of it. And I love it so much, not only because it's an awesome picture, but because it exemplifies a lot of these key traits in crocodilians today. So you have this beautiful set of teeth, sharp, horny, conical teeth, perfectly adapted for eating and tearing apart different animals, especially mammals and birds and things like that. You have this long snout with on top these round eyes that are sitting on the top of the skull. So this is perfectly adapted for them to slowly sneak up on their prey for animals drinking near the sides of large bodies of water. You have big limbs right here. So these are short limbs that are very strong, a lot of muscle attachments. Perfectly adapted for not all the time walking on land, but periodically. And finally, this really big tail that drags on the ground. So these animals are really well adapted for their ecological role today, these semiaquatic ambush predators. Nearly all crocodilians today are this ecological role. There are about 27 species of them, and so really ecologically limited. And they have remarkable similarities to their extinct relatives, at least some of them. So these are skulls in top-down view. So Paleosuchus is a dwarf caiman that lives in South America. You have a non-dwarf caiman and Crocodylus, like a Nile crocodile. And you can see these basic features that I'm talking about. So top-down view, you have small eyes, long snouts, relatively short, flattish skulls. Then they look almost identical to Borealisuchus. This is a fossil croc. This lived around the time of the dinosaurs and a little bit after, or I guess I should say non-avian dinosaurs. But look very similar. But this is an exception. Crocs are a lot more diverse than just animals like Borealisuchus. And to show that, I'm going to talk a little bit about their history. So there's a lot going on in this graph. Don't worry. This is a geological time scale showing the entire history of the Earth. So the origin of the Earth is right here, 4.56 billion years ago. Now is up at the top. And Crocs get their start in the late Triassic, so approximately 230 million years ago. So right here, the late Triassic. This is the same time that dinosaurs first appeared, lizards, turtles. It's a really important time period in the evolution of modern-day ecosystems. And last year's DinoFest was themed off of investigating the late Triassic and the end Triassic mass extinction that gave birth to this world of dinosaurs. So if you're really interested in this, which I highly suggest, you should go on YouTube and check out all those talks. But Crocs survived through 2 mass extinctions. So a mass extinction that we've been talking about is this geologically rapid event where a large proportion of plants and animals go extinct. Crocs have survived 2. The end Triassic right here, named because it happens at the end of the Triassic period, and the end Cretaceous, which we've been focusing on today. And so what's interesting, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in a little bit, is Crocs seem to do well through the end Triassic mass extinction, but okay through the end Cretaceous mass extinction. It's kind of debated. And so one of my questions for my PhD that I want to investigate, that I did investigate, is why are crocs still around today? What makes them so successful? A lot of their closest ancestors went extinct, and why did they manage to survive? And then also, why do they respond differently to these two different mass extinction events? So let's talk about the earliest crocodylomorphs. And I'm just going to abbreviate it Crocs because crocodylomorphs is a mouthful and it's easier to say. These are two animals that some of the earliest representatives of Crocs, Dromaeosaurus and Carnifex, both are found in eastern North America. And you can see some classic croc features are already here. So you have this long snout with sharp teeth, already in Dromaeosaurus. Something different, though, is the eyes are a little bit bigger. You can see the eyes located here with these googly eyes. And the skull is taller. So instead of having a flat skull like modern-day crocs and alligators do, gharials, already the skulls are taller. These animals are relatively large. However, other crocs living around the same time are not necessarily large. Animals like Hemiprotosukis, Pseudhesperosuchus, and Terrestriosukis are all relatively small-bodied animals. So we can all locate where the eyes are, here more. These animals still have the long snout, again, tall. And the other that's important, these animals lived in South America. So some crocs lived in North America, some lived in South America. Terrestriosukis lived in England. So already, crocs have a worldwide distribution, but interestingly, they are relatively rare in their ecosystems. So they're doing well, kind of diverse body plan, kind of diverse species-wise, but aren't as abundant as other animals at the time. The last thing I want to point out is on Terrestriosukis. Notice this animal's legs, or its limbs. Very long, very gracile. This animal is built for speed. It's small, so this is 10 centimeters. At most, this animal is probably around 3 or 4 feet. You can imagine like a dog. This is a hairless dog with a lot more teeth running around during the late Triassic. And these animals are not hanging around by water waiting for predators. This animal is running them down. So already we can see these big ecological differences from living crocodiles. And I am a particular specialist in croc teeth, and what these teeth tell me is that these animals are adapted for a wide range of animal material. So it is they are terrestrial generalists. So they live on land and they eat a lot of different things. So here we have the end-Triassic mass extinction. Crocs are living alongside, at this point, a lot of close relatives that are specialists. Some are large-bodied carnivores that specialize on eating big prey. Others are herbivores. All of them go extinct, except for crocs and this group called Pseudasuchians. For some reason, crocs survived. And I think it has to do with being this ecological terrestrial generalist. So we go through this mass extinction. Let's look at the people the crocs on the other side. So here is the handy-dandy geological timescale right there. I've highlighted where we are with the box that's going to continue to go throughout this talk. We're now in the early Jurassic, and we can see crocodylomorphs still have relatively small-bodied terrestrial animals. Look at Latargasuchus from South Africa, thin-limbed, running around, really wonderful animal. This is Protosuchus from, Protosuchus from the western North America, just south of us by a couple 100 miles. Also this ecological generalist. But pretty rapidly, we have a diversification, and I accidentally spoiled that. This is an animal called Steniosaurus. It is fully marine. It's kind of hard to tell because this block is dark against kind of lightish background, but this animal is fully marine. It's large-bodied already. Its limbs are tiny. This is absolutely beautiful preservation. It's from Germany. You can actually see tracheal rings, these cartilaginous rings that support the trachea, preserved. Just beautiful animal. And this is an artist rendition of what it looked like. Would have been living in water almost 100% of its time, if not 100% of its time. But not only that, we have diversification into the first semiaquatic animals that I don't have pictured here, but also, intriguingly and enigmatically, we have these teeth. So, like I said, I'm a tooth specialist, and we know that these belong to Crocs because the partial jaw looks almost identical to other closely related Crocs. However, we don't have the rest of the skull. Recently, Dr. Ermis and I published a study that investigated tooth complexity, and we found that it's highly likely that these animals end up to be herbivores. So already, within the first few million years following this end-Triassic mass extinctions, Crocs have gone from small and large-bodied terrestrial generalists to still small-bodied terrestrial generalists, terrestrial herbivores, semi-aquatic carnivores, and marine carnivores. So really rapid, what's called evolutionary radiation. So let's fast forward. This is geological timescale on the bottom, the x-axis, and this is the number of species on the y-axis. I should note, this is raw species count. There have been no fancy statistics done to this. The point that I want to illustrate, you can't see it that well, is croc diversity increasing through the Mesozoic. So as dinosaurs become more diverse through the Mesozoic, crocs are also becoming more diverse. So you can see that this little diversification, boop, through here, but then as we go to the Cretaceous, it's really a high point. So going up, leading up to the end Cretaceous mass extinction right here, let's talk about the crocs that lived at this time. So by the Cretaceous period, these semi-aquatic ambush predators that we know and love today and that we see today are highly diverse. So there are a lot of them. It's what's called evolutionary convergence. You've independently converged on this body plan. You have animals like Borealisuchus that I pointed out earlier, but also, I'm going to botch this name, Strainiochampsa, which almost looks like a modern-day caiman. These animals are, again, living on the sides of large bodies of water, capturing animals as they walk by. And what's really cool is their teeth look very similar to modern-day croc teeth. Again, you can see these teeth are built for these high bite pressures and eating almost anything. Because remember, crocs hatch from eggs that are quite small. So if you see a baby alligator, they're very cute and they'll chirp at you. It actually sounds like a video game noise, interestingly. But anyway, so they start out by eating insects, and as they grow older, what they eat gets bigger. So you go from insects to amphibians, to crayfish, and then turtles, and then finally you have a full adult animal eating like mammals. This is also where we have animals like Deinosuchus. It's one of, if not the largest croc that's ever existed. It lived here in Utah. And the reason I want to point out, for the audience's gratification, why I don't have a beautiful picture of its skull like this, is not because I didn't try to see it, but because it is so large, I could not possibly move it. This is a scale bar of about 20 centimeters. Yeah, and so this thing would have been over about a foot, or excuse me, over about a meter, so about 3 feet in length, its skull. There is its orbit, its eye right there, so you can see how long and wide its snout is. This is a really, really ridiculously big animal. However, there are not only these semi-aquatic ambush predators in the late Cretaceous. We have a huge diversity of actually terrestrial animals. And this is where I get really excited about crocs, because this is where people don't normally know about. They don't really know about these animals that lived, especially in the southern hemisphere, so continents like South America, Africa, and India. We have animals like Barusuchus, which is a very large predator that lived in South America. Its teeth are huge, definitely built for running down maybe small dinosaurs. Intriguingly, in this area at this time, we have an absence of middle body-sized theropods. So we have small theropods, and we have big theropods, but it's been hypothesized that Barusuchus is actually what's called a theropod mimic. So it's stepping into this ecological role. You have smaller taxa like Gondwanasuchus. Look at that big eye right there. Ararapisuchus, and these oddities like Notasuchus. And because I like teeth, I'm going to talk a little bit more about them, but all these animals are reconstructed as terrestrial carnivores. But Gondwanasuchus and Notasuchus illustrate this really important and interesting facet of late Cretaceous crocs. So zooming into the teeth, you can see Gondwanasuchus has these really beautiful, sharp teeth that have these deep grooves. You can see those grooves in the dark right there. We don't really see this in today's carnivores, and so we don't know why these grooves are there. It's an interesting question, but this is clearly a carnivore because in the front right here, in the back right here, you can actually kind of see it, are serrations. So these teeth are built like steak knives. They are or they are slicing through flesh, and these animals are definitely eating other animals. Notosuchus, intriguingly, is very different. So the study that Randy and I did looked at its tooth complexity, and we reconstruct it as, interestingly, a carnivore. So eating similar things as Gondwanasuchus. But what's fascinating is Notosuchus's teeth come together and touch. This doesn't sound very dramatic, but that's because we're mammals, and mammals, our teeth occlude. So when you close your mouth, your teeth touch. Note Gondwanasuchus doesn't have that. Notosuchus is doing something different. It's probably doing something akin to chewing, which, again, most animals today that aren't mammals, they don't chew. So Notosuchus is a very intriguing animal. So not only do you have specializations that are dissimilar from animals today, you have animals eating meat in a different way. And it only gets weirder from there. This is Semiaquatic. It's one of my favorite extinct crocs. It looks very different than any other croc that's ever lived. Note that you do not have this classic long snout. This animal looks like it got hit in the face with a shovel. So it's a pug-nosed croc is what everybody calls it. Look how big that eye is. You have these other weirdos like Armadillosuchus. This is from the latest Cretaceous of Madagascar. This animal is from the late Cretaceous of South America. So these southern continents are real hotbeds for croc oddities. Armadillosuchus, I don't have, unfortunately, a side view because the skull was a little crushed. But you can see, here's the eye right here. This is a weird, almost shield. And what crocs do is they have bone embedded in their skin. They have this today. It's basically armor. What Armadillosuchus did is it took all those bones and they grew together and created this shield. And it looks almost identical to an armadillo, which is a mammal. So it was named Armadillosuchus. Thankfully, scientific names make sense sometimes. But they don't just look weird, their teeth are weird too. So Semiaquatic has teeth that look almost like iguana teeth. We think it's eating plant material. Armadillosuchus, the study that I have done, reconstructs it as a generalist. It's probably an omnivore, so eating both plants and animals. We don't think that it's a carnivore, because remember, it's got this big shield on its back. So you're probably not going to run down prey if you're carrying this big, heavy, bony shield. And what's fascinating, so I hypothesized that going through the end-Triassic mass extinction, these terrestrial generalists were able to survive because they could eat a lot of different things and diversify. So having a broad diet allows you to basically be more lucky. You have a higher chance of survival. So other speakers previous to me have talked about this in animals like insects going through the end-Cretaceous mass extinction, birds, and what I'm hypothesizing is that with crocs, the same basic concepts are true. But what's fascinating, again, in the Cretaceous is you have these terrestrial generalists that would have been able to take advantage of these ecological open roles after the end-Cretaceous mass extinction, but for some reason, they all seem to go extinct just before the mass extinction right here. So Arariprasuchus almost completely disappears. Notosuchus is gone. Armadillosuchus, another terrestrial generalist, disappears just before this mass extinction. We don't know why. It's been hypothesized that cooling climate is playing a role, and I don't deny that. I think it is an important thing. But what we have left over, who get to the mass extinction, are these semiaquatic generalists. So remember, these animals can eat almost anything. And so what happens is you go through this mass extinction, and there aren't animals that are there to dominate these terrestrial ecosystems like they were in the end-Triassic. It's complicated by the fact that a lot of these South American and African areas that might contain the Maastrichtian, the latest age stuff, we don't have them. So Dr. Julia Clark was talking earlier that there's some really important work going on in South America that might be able to fix this, or at least start to. However, our semi-aquatic journalists, it does appear did diversify after the end Cretaceous mass extinction. So you have oddities like Ceranosuchus and Thracosuchus and Laurasuchus, all from the southern hemisphere again, that do well, but going into the Paleogene and going through the Paleogene, all systematically go extinct. Again, this is probably where the cooling climate is coming in and playing a role. So despite their success in these semi-aquatic and marine ecosystems, they're still going extinct. And who's left over but animals like Bovarosuchus, moving on. Diplocynodon, Procamidae. These animals look almost identical to modern-day crocs, and they persevere. So the last thing that I really want to emphasize isn't that ecology is probably, I think, possibly playing a role in their success, but also that the idea of crocs only being semi-aquatic ambush predators is a relatively recent development in their evolutionary history. So they're not just living fossils. There's this time period is actually unique in their history. So just to wrap things up, I hypothesize that ecology may have played a role and helped them succeed and diversify following the end Triassic mass extinction. So being these terrestrial generalists really helped them. However, the loss of these terrestrial generalists may have helped explain why they didn't respond the same way to the end Cretaceous mass extinction. So they did okay. They diversified just after, but they weren't able to take advantage of these new ecological roles like mammals were and like dinosaurs and crocs were previous to that. And finally, only having these semi-aquatic ambush predators is a recent development. Only in the last couple of dozen million of years have these animals really come to dominate the croc diversity. So with that, I want to thank you all for listening. We made it to the last talk. Thank Randy for my advisor. Yeah, thanks so much. Any questions?
You mentioned that there were two types of crocs, herbivores and the generalists, and herbivores basically disappeared. Is it possible that then the generalists started to eat up the herbivores and eat their young as they came into the water, and the rats and the mammals ate the eggs?
Well, I simplified it a little bit. You also have these marine animals that do well and other specialists like these big Bovarosuchids that seem to disappear for quite a while. So there are other specialists beyond the herbivores, which I should say were independently evolved, separate from these early Jurassic ones. So that's one of the cool things about these croc herbivory is it appears multiple times in different environments. But what I think happened is not necessarily that other crocs were eating their young or rodent-like animals taking advantage. I think when you specialize on something, it makes you really good for that particular environment. But if anything happens to that environment, you're more likely to go extinct. It's harder to adapt. Whereas if you're a generalist, you're able to take advantage of different ecological or different food sources. So probably by specializing on plants, those plants might have gone extinct through the mass extinction event, and these animals weren't able to eat anything else. So the way I think about it, and I wanted to say, but I totally forgot, was like in graduate school, I ate a lot of Taco Bell and Little Caesars pizza. I specialized in these bad food items. It got me through grad school, but in the long term, that's probably detrimental to my health. Whereas if I had a more broad diet, I'm more likely to survive through traumatic events like doing my dissertation. Yeah, so I would say predation definitely plays a role, but probably it's you're more likely to go extinct when you're a specialist. Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, let's get the mic.
So if the terrestrial generalists were the most diverse and they were dominant during the end Triassic extinction, then how come instead of the semi-aquatic crocodilians, how come the terrestrial generalists died instead of the crocodilians? Because I mean, the semiaquatic generalists would have spent most of their time in the water, and water at like 70 degrees feels a lot colder
Yeah.
than air at 70 degrees.
Yeah.
So how come they were less affected by the climate change than the terrestrial generalists?
That's a really, really good question. We just don't know. I don't know yet why you had this extinction, because it wasn't part of the mass extinction, why these terrestrial animals are periodically going extinct. Like I said, people have hypothesized that it's a cooler climate, and what's important is broad scale cooling over time. And yeah, I mean, I hate to say, I don't know, but you could do your dissertation on it. You can study that, yeah. The other thing is, so a lot of these terrestrial crocs lived in the southern hemisphere. So animals like Deinosuchus, Borealisuchus, they all lived up in the northern hemisphere, and they seem to do quite well. We don't know why these terrestrial animals dominated in the south and not in the north, but it does seem like the northern ones did better and were less susceptible to this extinction event. And they're the ones that are around today. So the living crocodilians, this group that includes alligators, gharials, and crocodiles, got their start in the Cretaceous period and started diversifying in the Cretaceous period. So while everybody else went down, they started to succeed. But why is that? Yeah.
So what's the size distributions of the ones that were going through the KPG extinction? Like, was it the smaller ones, like with a lot of other different families that were more likely to survive?
This is a really good question that it's crazily enough, nobody has, as far as I'm aware, addressed that. So there hasn't been a whole lot of work investigating the croc response to mass extinctions. The animals that do survive seem to get pretty large pretty quickly. There would have been a couple of meters. I don't know if, like, in terms of how many pounds there'd be, but within a couple of 100,000 years to a million years, they're back to obviously not Deinosuchus size. We've never reached that again, but pretty large animals, a couple of meter or two, so 3 to 10 feet, say, give or take.
So why did, like, take Deinosuchus for example, why did it downsize over time, like, to like the modern day crocodiles? Because like lack food or something?
That's a good question. So it probably has something to do with a cooling climate. So animals now, compared to the Cretaceous period, are smaller. So like we don't have any sauropods walking around. We don't have any, big theropods. We do, but like non-avian theropods walking around. And so probably a combination of cooler temperatures with animals that aren't as big are playing roles. But I mean, like a saltwater croc and Nile crocodile are quite large. They're not, again, not Deinosuchus size, but I would never want to really interact with one. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
I have one actually.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. What your hypothesis here basically is that the specialists died out and the generalists were the ones that were able to survive, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That being said, why do you think that the crocodiles did not re-evolve speciality and other things did, like you said, mammals and other sorts of creatures?
Yeah, I think competition with mammals and cooling climate. So in environments where you don't have as rigorous of mammal competition, there are really intriguing evidences of crocs starting to pop back on land. So the Cuban croc, I love that picture in particular, doesn't have webbed feet. It's the only croc that doesn't have webbed feet. And I just saw on the BBC that they're really good jumpers. But they're on Cuba, prior to humans coming out, as far as I'm aware, there's no big terrestrial predators. And similarly, in in Australia, there are intriguing hints of more terrestrial-ish Crocs. So that go extinct. They never quite get there, but I think that, again, cooling climate, and they just can't compete with mammals. I hate to admit that, but mammals are quite fast. So yeah, that would just be my hypothesis, though. You know, I'm sure ecologists out there are like cringing.
If I remember correctly, don't crocodilians increase in size of their whole lifetime?
Yeah, they grow continuously.
Yes. Could it be that the smaller ones actually just had a larger attrition rate?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think because what happens is, although they're growing quick or growing continuously, their growth rate slows down until by the time you get to a really old croc in its 50s and 60s, they're not growing that much. So probably what happened was back in the Cretaceous period, these big crocs like Deinosuchus and Sarcosuchus had higher growth rates. But as far as I'm aware, no one's done the histological studies, so cutting open the bones to investigate the growth rates to test that. For some reason, there hasn't been a lot of croc research done on a lot of these simple questions that are really good questions, like these terrestrial animals, we just don't know how they grew. Were they cold-blooded or warm-blooded, you know, air quotes. We don't have good data on that yet. So probably in the coming, 20, 30 years, we're going to get really good answers. But yeah, it's a great question.
Question about the marine crocs.
Yeah.
They died out much earlier than the Cretaceous extinction, if I remember. But was it just competition that took them out?
Some marine crocs did. So these Thalattosuchians, they're called. They had a wonderful, beautiful classical evolutionary radiation in the oceans that did quite well, died out in the early Cretaceous. Some people have hypothesized that there was a minor extinction event there. Maybe the dropping of the sea level started dropping, so their ecosystems disappeared. But crocs went back into the ocean, and so a lot of these weirdos, I shouldn't say that, a lot of these amazing animals from the Paleogene, like Sciuranosuchus and Thracosuchus, are probably, if not marine, living in estuary-like environments. So Dirosaurs, this group, goes back into the ocean just before the end-Cretaceous mass extinction, makes it through it, seems to diversify, and then as climate's cooling, they systematically disappear as whales evolve. Was it competition against whales? Was it just the cooling climate? Again, it can't be sure. It's tough to say that in the fossil record because they just don't seem to ever overlap. But yeah, it's why did they go extinct? Why these other marine crocs go extinct? I think probably their habitat disappearing would be my hypothesis. Yeah, awesome.
To take your analogy about Taco Bell and Little Caesars,
Yeah.
and expand it, the alligators and crocodilians that ate a more specialized diet couldn't adapt well. Just like if all you ate was like Taco Bell and Little Caesars, you went to a place where those restaurants didn't exist, you'd have a hard time finding food that your body could digest and that you could eat and catch and,
Yeah.
prepare.
So this hypothesis that I attempted to test and explore with my dissertation was really based off of work that had been done on mammals. And so through the end-Cretaceous mass extinction, you see this elimination of both hypercarnivores and herbivores. So whereas omnivores or animals that specialize in insects, they seem to stick around. And so I was like, oh, can we test that using the croc fossil record? And I think there is some support. But yeah, that's it, exactly, yeah.
So I have one question too.
Oh.
Sit down, Randy. So where are you going next with your research? You just graduated. You're an impressive man. You're going to be in LA wowing everybody.
Oh. maybe.
How far are you going to continue to research your crocodiles, and what are the research questions you're going to be looking at?
Yeah, so hopefully I'm going to continue this work and actually publish it and get the peer review. We'll see what the reviewers say. But actually my work at the Dinosaur Institute in LA is going to be on dinosaurs. So like I said, I've specialized in teeth. I'm going to be investigating how dinosaur teeth change through time. So there's this wonderful relationship in mammals today and lizards, squamates, where tooth complexity is related to diet. So carnivores have simple teeth built for basically just tearing into prey and slicing it. Herbivores have more complicated teeth. That has to do with plants having phytolith that we've heard a lot about. It's hard to digest, so if you chew it a lot, it helps you break down and digest food. I'm going to investigate this relationship in dinosaurs and see how, or at least I'm going to try to, see how their tooth morphology, their tooth shape change through time, especially with the rise of angiosperms. So we've heard a lot about angiosperms. They really reshaped the environment in terms of, literally reshaping the environment, and also animals adapting to eat them. So I want to see if there is a coordinated shift in dinosaur tooth morphology too. So I don't want to leave Crocs behind forever, but given that I'm working on at the Dinosaur Institute, I need to study some dinosaurs.
All right, let's thank Keegan.
Thank you.